Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mostly Nerdy Podcast, a show where we talk mostly about nerd stuff, but sometimes about some other things as well. I'm your host, Rick Curci, and welcome to episode 3 of the show. We got some things that we're going to talk about. Number 1, I got back into Overwatch. I'm all Overwatched up all of a sudden. For the first time in 2 years, I'm playing the game again, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about it. Also, I saw Annabelle Comes Home earlier this week, so I want to give you my review, my thoughts on that movie, if I think that maybe it's worth you going to see it, if that's something that you're into, if you're into horror movies and you're into the Conjuring universe. We'll go ahead and we'll talk a little bit more about Annabelle Comes Home. Also, I want to ask the question. This is a question that I got into a year ago when Avengers Infinity War released, but has the Marvel Cinematic Universe peaked with Endgame? This is a question that I posed to a friend of mine a year ago, and I'm going to bring the question back up because I want to discuss it. There are some numbers that I pulled. I did a little bit of research. I did a little bit of homework. So we're going to talk about it. Also, I did earlier today go to see Avengers Endgame's re-release, which means that I saw the new post-credit material that was in after the credits. We're going to talk about that stuff. I'm going to save it for maybe a little bit closer to the end of the show. So if you have not seen Avengers Endgame, because I might get into some spoiler stuff with Avengers Endgame, if you haven't seen it, which normally I would be here and saying, how could you not see Avengers Endgame yet? But I realized that not everybody has been a hardcore Marvel fan, has gone to the movies for every single release like a lot of us have. So they're slowly working their way through. I have a lot of friends that are working their way to Endgame, just haven't gotten to Endgame yet. So if you're one of those people, end the episode a little early so that you avoid the spoilers that might happen. And then when you are ready, come back to the episode, check out the time code in the description, and then jump to the topic so you can hear my opinions if that's what you want to do. So we will talk about the Avengers Endgame re-release as well. I want to look a little forward to Spider-Man Far From Home because it is the last Marvel Phase 3 movie. It serves as an epilogue to Avengers Endgame, and with it coming out next week, I record these episodes on Friday, and then they get released on Monday. So when I say next week, I'm saying exactly a week from the recording of this video, which will be later this week when you guys are viewing it on YouTube. So with that said, like with last week, all the topics are over here. So if you want to jump to any of those specific topics, go ahead. Down in the description below, there will be time code. You can jump specifically to that topic if that's the only thing that you want to hear about. Otherwise, we're going to get started. Real quick, though, before we get started, if you could give the video a like, if you could subscribe to the channel, and then hit the bell icon so you can get notifications on every new episode that gets posted up every week. It really helps me out, really helps the channel out, motivates me to do more and to be more creative and do more, basically. So if you could take the time, just do that kind of stuff real quick. Also, leave a comment below on any of the topics that we talk about today. I am a huge fan of debating and talking with people online about this kind of stuff. So please feel free to do all of those things if you would be so kind. Let's dive right in, though. Let's talk about the very first topic, which is that I am back into Overwatch. I played Overwatch a few months after it released because Overwatch was a game that I didn't feel like was a game that I felt was made for me. I'm not a very competitive gamer. I'm a competitive person, but I'm not good at competitive multiplayer. I don't play a whole lot of Call of Duty. I play Call of Duty, but I'm not good at it. I play a lot of Battlefield. I'm a little bit better than I am with Call of Duty, but I'm mainly playing these games to have fun. My style of game are role-playing games, open world games, games like Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, but more on the role-playing side, Skyrim, Mass Effect. I like those kinds of single-player focused games. God of War is another game. Because it has a strong single-player focus, I'm a big fan of plot and story and characters, so I really enjoy those style of games. But a game like Overwatch, which is entirely multiplayer, entirely competitive, it's entirely online, and also there's not a whole lot of substance to it. When it released, it was strictly what it was. There wasn't a whole lot. Now it has like these arcade modes where you can play basically team deathmatch. There's elimination. There's Lucio Ball. There's a whole lot of other things that you could do in the game that weren't there when it released. So when I saw Overwatch, I just kind of gave it a pass. It was not my style of game. I never thought that I would be into it. Well, I worked with a lot of people that would play Overwatch, and they picked a day of the week, and they would gather up, and they would play Overwatch every day of that week. That day was Wednesday. Not that it really matters to the story, but that's what the day was. So I remember getting home from work, booting up Overwatch and playing with them. And it was fun to play with friends. It was fun to coordinate. And honestly, with a game like Overwatch that is highly competitive, requiring a requirement to communicate is huge. You need to communicate if you're going to be effective in that game. It's a fun game. It's the exception to the rule for me. It is a great game, and it's a game that for whatever reason it clicks with me. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm the best Overwatch player to ever play Overwatch. I'm not the best Mercy or the best Doomfist or the best Roadhog, but it's a game that I'm like, you know what? I play well with Overwatch versus some other games. And because of that, I've grown attached to it. So I played the game for a year, and the last time I played was about a month after Doomfist release. Now, Doomfist came out in July of 2017, so I played into August of 2017. After that, that was it. I didn't touch the game for about 2 years. Now, granted, I might have sprinkled it in here and there sporadically, but I never really got into it. It was just a game that I played. Doomfist came out. I went hard with Doomfist, and then that was that. Didn't touch the game for a while. What got me into it recently, though, was that I have a friend who streams on Twitch. Her name is Venusaurus Rex. So I'm going to put her name and the link right here. So if you want to go ahead and check it out, would highly recommend it. Really support her. She does a lot of hard work with her channel. Does a lot of stuff at night typically. So if you're just bored at night, check her out if she's streaming. But I was watching her play Overwatch, and then she and I were going back and forth, and I played the Overwatch game on the Xbox. So I didn't have it for the PlayStation 4, which is what she had. Now, I did get a PlayStation 4 recently. I've talked about this. And last week I said, you know what? For the first time ever, I'm going to buy the exact same game again. I have now 2 copies of Overwatch, one on the PlayStation and one on the Xbox. And I got it for the PlayStation because I wanted to specifically be able to play with her. So I got it. Took me a little bit to kind of get back into it. There were a lot of characters that they've added. And it took me a second to kind of just get an idea as far as like, okay, what does that character do? What does that character do? What is that character called? Because it's important to know what the characters are called so you can call it out. If you're being attacked by Hammond, you got to know who Hammond is. And actually, fun fact, Hammond isn't even the name of the character. It's a wrecking ball. So when you call this character out, that way people know, okay, well, this character that's on the enemy team is over here, so I need to go here to take it out. It's important to know the call outs. It's important to know what to say and how to react to certain things. It's also important to know what the enemy abilities are so that you know how to best counter it. When one character is doing a thing, you need to know how to respond accordingly. For example, if you're playing as Bastion, now Bastion is this robot. He could turn into a turret and just gun people down. Now, he will deal a ton of damage. If he catches you, he's probably going to melt you. But there's another character named Genji. Now, Genji has an ability where he can deflect attacks back at the attacker. So if a Genji catches a Bastion as it's unloading, the Bastion will essentially kill itself if the Genji times his deflecting right. So you got to be careful when the Genji starts deflecting. You got to know what to look for so that you know, oh crap, I got to stop attacking and then wait for him to stop doing that ability, then I can gun him down. So you got to know what the other abilities of your attackers are. This is an important thing with Overwatch and why I like it so much. It's more in depth than on the surface level. You don't just pick a character, go in and gun everybody down. There's a team effort. You have to do a little bit of homework. You have to know what the characters do. You have to know what the characters are named so that you can make the call outs properly. So I had to kind of relearn the game when I went back. There was a Moira. I had no idea what Moira was. Then there was, like I said, Hammond, Wrecking Ball. I didn't know what that was. Orisa. What the hell is an Orisa? So you have to kind of take your time and just kind of do a little bit of quick play with your friends online, and just get a little bit of information from them. When I played years ago, the 3 characters that I played the most as were Doomfist, Mercy, and Roadhog. Now, I typically like to be more on the support side. If our team needs a healer, I'm probably going to be one of the first people to go healer. I'm going to be like, you know what? I will take this hit. I will go be a healer if our team needs a healer. So I usually go to Mercy because Mercy's easy. You just kind of aim your ability, your healing ability in the general direction, and it will snap to that person. You get like a little interface that tells you how much health your ally has, and then you're good to go. It's easy to kind of keep track of everything. The most important thing with Mercy, in my opinion, is that positioning. You don't want to be out in the open. You don't want to be in front of a Reinhardt shield that your teammate is trying to project. You want to be in a safe area so that you could provide those supports. Now, I like doing it this way because I feel like I'm better as a support than I am as DPS. Because as DPS, you need to be able to get some kills. You got to get some eliminations. You got to do some damage because you're the people that are going to be relied on when we are pushing to make the push effective. So I typically tend to hang back because I'm not so great as a DPS player. So I will hang a little bit back, and as my team pushes forward, I'm in the back lines, just kind of making sure everybody's got healed up. Make sure you got a Band-Aid, I got you a Band-Aid. That's the kind of player I am. It's easier for me to kind of hang back and help my teammates out so that they can be effective. Now, you can still make mistakes as Mercy. You got to be careful with your reses. You got to use your reses properly. You got to bring your allies back from the dead. You got to know when to do that. When is it the most effective? When is it the least effective? You got to know these things. These are important things a Mercy player should know. Now, when the game released, every character, and this is still the case, it sounded like I was going to say that this is different, but it's actually still the case. Every character has an ultimate ability. Mercy's ult, at the time, this is the difference. Mercy's ult was that she had a group res. So when her ultimate ability was up, I would usually fly in when all of our allies are dead, and I would get a group res, and everybody came up at the same time, and then we would continue with the push right after we had wiped. Well, in the years that I've been away, that has changed, which is also another thing that I like that Blizzard does with Overwatch, is that they keep updating the game. They keep making sure to maintain that balance. Every time they release a new character, the character is free. It's just an update. You don't have to buy DLC. You don't have to pay extra money for it. Same thing with maps. Maps are free. They just get updated and patched into the game. The only time you ever have to spend additional money outside of the actual copy of the game is when you want to go ahead and buy coins, microtransactions, and then with that, you will get cosmetic stuff. You know, there's nothing that you can buy online that will make you a more effective Overwatch player. You have to learn. You have to learn each character, pick a character, learn that character, learn how to best be effective, and then try to pick a different character. It's best if you know every category. You could be a good DPS, you could be a good tank, you could be a good healer, you could be whatever. It's important to know how to play these roles well. And if your team needs a certain thing, like we need a tank or we need a healer or we need a DPS, you got to be able to switch. All right, I use this character as a DPS. I use this character as a tank. Now, going back to Mercy, again, her original ultimate ability was that she had a group res. Well, that changed, and I didn't know that. So I came back in, and people were like, hey, can I get a res? And I was like, oh, no, it's not up yet. I don't have it right now. And then our group would die. I would dive in and use my ultimate, and then nothing would happen. And I remember being like, what the hell is this? And somebody I was playing with was like, dude, that's the wrong ultimate. And I was like, whoa, so there's two? And he goes, no. Originally, it was one. They've changed it. So now Mercy's ultimate ability is that she's able to fly around, like legitimately you look up and then you go up. She's able to fly around. Her heals will heal two people. And I've never actually been able to do this, but apparently she can res two people at a time, because one of her other new abilities is that she can res individual people. Now, your cooldown is about 30 seconds, which is a little hefty, especially when you're in the middle of a game and you need to use a res, but you've already used it. It's actually pretty effective. I actually kind of like these changes, because then I could turn around and be like, crap, the other healer went down. And so I would bring the other healer back, because it's always important to have two healers. That way you can support a little bit more effectively. These are the changes that you kind of have to relearn. So I have to now relearn when is it appropriate to use my res, because I've gotten into the situation where I've resed a teammate and then they immediately died again. So sometimes you got to be smart. Are they going to get killed immediately again? Is this the best time to use your res? Should you save it? Should you just wait for a more opportune time? So I'm still kind of relearning the ropes a little bit, but honestly, just relearning the game. I've been playing a lot as the newer characters too. So I've been playing a lot as Moira. Now, Moira is an effective healer, but she's also really effective as a DPS as well. Now, if you're playing DPS Moira, you're probably not playing the character properly. She is ultimately a healer. She's just a healer that has a little bit of teeth, so she could defend herself. Now, Mercy is the opposite of that. She's a very effective healer, but she doesn't do so well when attacked. Now, you have a pistol you can use, but the second you pull your pistol out, then that's all that time that your teammates aren't getting healed. So you have to basically hope that one of your other teammates are around so that they can defend you. The point I'm trying to make is that I've had a lot of fun with Overwatch. Because of my friend streaming, which then ultimately got me into it, I've just been having a lot of fun with it. Now, Overwatch is not necessarily a game that I would consider a Zen game. It's very competitive. Sometimes it can be stressful. You do have to communicate. A Zen game for me, and this is a term that I started using a while ago, is a game that I can just play and then turn my brain off. I'm going to just disconnect from the world around me, all the stresses of this, that, or whatever, and I'm just going to play this game. I'm going to not think. I'm going to put on a podcast, or I'm going to listen to some music, and I'm just going to do my thing. There are two games that do that for me. Number one, Minecraft. Just go into Minecraft, mine. Go into a tunnel, find coal or iron or gold or whatever, diamonds, whatever, and just kind of play the game, build up your little house. It's not a very complicated game. It's not a very stressful game either. It has stressful moments, especially when you realize you don't know how to get out of a certain cave, but still, it's a very relaxing game. Sea of Thieves has also become that for me. I've been playing a little bit of Sea of Thieves sporadically lately, but that's a game where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to sail the seas and just relax. And I'm going to go on this island, I'm going to find my treasure, and I'm going to put it on my boat, and I'm just going to go around and I'm going to collect treasure. And every once in a while, I see an enemy player, and I'm just going to avoid them. And lately, it's been easy to avoid people. But sometimes you get into a situation where you are on an island and an enemy ship is approaching, and then it gets a little stressful. But honestly, I like those like moments where it kind of is like you're relaxing and you're like, ooh, I got to really pay attention here. Overwatch is not that. Overwatch is you really got to communicate. You really got to pay attention. Sometimes it can be stressful. Sometimes it can be frustrating because it is a very competitive game. It is also a game that has been big in the esports world. So I've been watching a lot of esports, specifically Overwatch. Really, it's the only thing esports related that I can watch because I understand the game, and so I understand what I'm seeing, versus something like Rainbow Six Siege where I'm watching that and I'm like, I guess I know what they're doing. But if you remember earlier, years ago when that game released, I wasn't a big fan of Rainbow Six Siege. Still, I'm not. I haven't played the game since I've made those reviews, but ultimately Overwatch seems to be my game. You know, it's the competitive game that I'm going to go to, and I'm going to be like, you know what? I'm halfway decent. I'm not the best Overwatch player, but I'm halfway decent at it, and I enjoy my time with it. So that's my opinion on Overwatch. I've just been playing a lot of it. It's been exciting. I've been liking the new stuff. Also, one of the cool things that I like about Overwatch is that they do take their time to give you a little bit of backstory into the characters. Not in-game, though. If you look online, like you look on YouTube and you look up some Overwatch shorts, they are really well-produced, well-animated shorts of certain characters. And I've been watching a whole lot on, like, the lore of this character and the lore of this character because Overwatch is a world that has history. Now, the game doesn't do so much on the side of showing that history. There is no story mode in the game, but it makes me really wish that there were some sort of element to the game that allowed players to explore the world of Overwatch and maybe even advance it. Because there hasn't been so much on, like, we know what has happened, but what is happening currently. Like, what Overwatch was disassembled and then they've reassembled. So what does that mean? What happened after they reassembled? Because and then you could fall down that rabbit hole of lore and stuff. But it's an interesting game. If you've never had a chance to play Overwatch, I would highly recommend it. It's not that hard to grab. My recommendation is that if you've never played Overwatch before and you're just going to try to jump in, pick a character, pick one character, learn that character, and then once you've gotten better and better and better with that character, pick a different character in a different category. If you were choosing DPS, go healer. If you were using healer, go tank or whatever. But I would highly recommend Overwatch. I'm really enjoying my time being back in that world and being back in that game. So that's all I'm going to say on Overwatch. I talked a little bit more about it than I thought I would. But let's move on here. I want to talk about Annabelle Comes Home. So we're going to get into the review for Annabelle Comes Home, which is I forgot to keep count. I was supposed to make the list before I went live here. But we got The Conjuring, Conjuring 2. And then there is The Nun, Annabelle Creation. So I guess this is the 6th in the franchise. It's good. I like this movie. it's not a movie that I think is mind-blowing, unbelievably the best horror movie I've ever seen. It's pretty by the numbers. But as far as the Conjuring universe, it's enjoyable in more ways than one, but I can totally understand why people would not be on board for it. Let me get into it real quick. I will avoid spoilers, so you don't have to worry about that. The thing about this that I guess people could see as negative is there are a lot of jump scares and repeated sequences. So before I get into that, though, I do kind of want to talk a little bit about the story here. So the story of Annabelle, if you're familiar, Annabelle is a doll that is haunted. That is basically, they mentioned in the movie that a demon is not really possessing it, but really the doll is acting as a beacon for it. But there is a demon associated with the Annabelle doll. And basically there is these psychics, these paranormal investigators, demonic investigators, the Warrens. And if you've been following the Conjuring universe, you know these characters. They find the Annabelle doll, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to take it to our place. We're going to put it in a place. We're going to keep it contained, and then therefore it will not bring any harm to anybody from this point forward. We will keep it safe, and we will keep it locked away. Now, this is basically the movie that Annabelle has come to the house. So honestly, I think this takes place between the movie Annabelle and The Conjuring 1. So it's within the universe. It's not a sequel to Conjuring 2. But then certain things start happening. Annabelle escapes while the Warrens are away. Their daughter is being watched by a babysitter. Annabelle gets out and shit goes down. So that's pretty much this. But like I said, there are a lot of jump scares. There are a lot of repeated sequences. Now, what I mean by that is the movie really only takes place inside the Warren household. So there's a lot of people investigating weird sounds. And at the time, you kind of look at this and you think to yourself, you know, there is some creepy stuff happening. But usually in horror movies, the trope is that the characters in the movie are stupid. And there are two instances where I thought to myself, this is a stupid move, but it kind of makes sense. Because if I were in that situation, I probably would do the same thing. Now, let's just say, for example, if I know I am being stalked by a psychopathic killer, then I'm probably not going to explore every single sound. I'm not going to go into the dark rooms because I know that they're around. But in this movie, for a lot of the movie, people are unaware that something paranormal or demonic is happening. So when they investigate sounds, it's actually not that unbelievable. You know, as the viewer, that's not a good thing. You shouldn't go do that. But if you were to put yourself in the role of the character, then it kind of makes sense of like, yeah, this is a babysitter that heard a noise when really the kid's in her room sleeping and you are responsible for the well-being of that kid. So when you hear a sound, you got to go investigate. So to me, it didn't feel like the characters were acting stupid. There is another point though, where a character goes into a room, because there's a room where the Warrens have kept all of the things that they felt were used in like satanic rituals or demonic rituals, or were possessed or whatever. These were basically tainted objects, and Annabelle the doll being one of them. This room is a room that really nobody should go in, and you should certainly not touch anything. In fact, there are signs that say don't touch anything. Well, you see it in the trailer, so I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, but there is one character that goes in and she starts messing around with everything. While the warnings say don't touch anything, you do kind of sit there and you say, that character is stupid. She's doing exactly what everybody in this movie is telling her not to do. And then I thought to myself, you know what? If the movie gives her a reason for going in that room, because she's very determined to go in that room. If the movie gives a reason as to why, then I can forgive it. And I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for it, and finally it happens. And I'm like, okay, it makes sense. It's not like a person who has heard the rumors about this room and now she wants to investigate the room, and by doing that, she set off all this demonic evil stuff. Admittedly, she doesn't make the smartest decision all the time. But this was a really key point in the movie where I thought to myself, if she is just curious, and that's the only explanation that the movie gives me, then I'm going to really be upset. But they didn't. They actually gave her a good reason. So because of that, I thought that the characters were actually done really well, particularly the daughter, Judy Warren. I don't remember the young actress's name, but I've been seeing her in a lot of stuff lately. I'm a big fan of Designated Survivor. She's the actress that plays Kiefer Sutherland's daughter in the show. And then the girl Daniela, who is the friend to the babysitter. Both of them do really, really well. And Daniela is the girl that ultimately goes inside the room, but she has good motivation. Now, the only characters that I don't think are done quite as well is the babysitter herself, who I believe her name was Mary Ellen, and then the love interest to her, which is this kid Bob. I feel like, and I was listening to a review. I can't remember if it was Jeremy Jahns or not. I'm just going to throw his name out there because maybe it was actually him. But I feel like the character of Bob was added in post. That was something that I believe Jeremy Jahns said, and I completely and totally agree with that. It does feel like he was somebody that they were like, you know what, we need to add in Bob so that Mary Ellen has a little bit more to do. Because other than that, Mary Ellen's only thing in the movie is being a babysitter. And she does do things in the movie. She does get involved with everything that goes down, but ultimately everybody else has another reason for being there or something else that drives them. And with Bob, it gives a little bit for Mary Ellen to do outside of the scares, but ultimately it's not a whole lot. So that was one of the weaker points in the movie for me. But like I said, there's a lot of jump scares and there's a lot of repeated sequences. There's a lot of the characters investigating weird sounds or whatever. And then it builds tension. The music starts coming up and then there's boom, big jump scare. There was one that was particularly effective. And I don't know why it was so telegraphed. I don't know why it got me like it did. Cause there's a moment where it's, I'm trying to avoid spoilers here, but there's a moment that kind of pulls me into the moment where I'm like, okay, I like what's happening. And then it builds tension. And for some reason, I'm just missing all the signs. Because as somebody who has really watched a lot of movies and have been examining things that movies do, this was textbook. It's building for a jump scare. They're going to turn the camera and bam, there's going to be a jump scare. And I missed all the signs and I got really mad at myself. But the scare happens and out loud, I was like, shit, like in the movie theater. It was just really intense, and it was the biggest scare for me, but I was like, damn, that was good. But I understand that maybe not a lot of people would enjoy that. There are a lot of jump scares. I hate jump scares. I don't like movies that have jump scares. And it's not even so much the jump scare, it's the anticipation of a jump scare. And that's really one of the things that this movie kind of leans on. It doesn't feel cheap though, weirdly enough. Like it's a movie that is entertaining, and there were a couple of jump scares that I was anticipating and was able to fight, but then there was one that legitimately got me good. But it wasn't just that it was relying entirely on the jump scares. There's a lot of things that happen in the background that are actually done really well. One of the things about this movie is that, like I said before, Annabelle serves as like a beacon for other spirits and other entities. Because of that, there are multiple entities in this film. Now, there are a lot of different entities and they all have different abilities, and so they have different traits and different things that they would do. I just really enjoyed their use of things that they were doing in the background, where you would just see something standing in a corner, and the movie doesn't draw too much attention to it. Really, some of them are actually pretty missable. But I liked that they were there because it helps build that tension. And ultimately, yeah, a lot of that stuff does lead to jump scares, which is primarily what the movie tends to lean on. But it wasn't like it was leaning entirely just on that. It's just mainly on that. But again, like I said, I can understand why some people would be disappointed by that. And you know what? There are jump scares. If that's not what you're into, this movie might not be the best thing for you. But I enjoyed it. The multiple entities, they are kind of thrown in there as a way of maybe teasing future spinoffs. They did the same thing for The Conjuring 2. They had the Crooked Man and then they had the Nun, and the Nun was what got the spinoff. But there are at least three different, maybe even more than that, but there are at least three different entities that I could see them spinning off into other Conjuring universe films. No, but ultimately, I enjoyed this movie. I walked away from it really enjoying it. If you are a fan of the Conjuring universe and the Conjuring movies and the Annabelle movies, this is definitely a movie that I think you should go ahead and check out. But if you're not a fan of jump scares and you think that jump scares are cheap, this movie does have a lot of that, and it does lean on that a lot. So if that's something that you do not like, this movie might not be the best thing for you. I do kind of wish that they had done a little bit more on the horror, but I realize that horror is kind of a harder thing to do. Like, it's hard to scare people sometimes without doing jump scares, but maybe that's the trick. You know, you gotta figure out a way to do that. Again, like I said, I walked out of this movie and I found myself entertained. I do not feel upset that I went and saw that movie. It's like Child's Play, you know? Child's Play, I went and I saw it and I was like, you know what? I am entertained by this movie. And I walked out and I was like, I don't feel like I wasted my time. That was a good movie. Granted, I think Annabelle Comes Home might be the better horror movie. Child's Play, I wish, was a little scarier. Honestly, I going back to Child's Play was a movie that I feel like started as one script, and then people realized, you know what, we can add the Chucky character and the Child's Play title, and we could really kind of rope this in. It's a very different movie than the original, but in a lot of ways, Child's Play is not typically particularly a scary movie. Where Annabelle Comes Home, there are a lot of horror elements. But like I said, I enjoyed this movie. I would recommend it to people who are fans of the Conjuring universe. I would recommend it if you're looking for a horror movie that is pretty effective, especially with some of its jump scares. I would recommend this movie. But if you do not like the jump scares, this movie might not be the best thing for you. Also, in terms of plot, there's not a whole lot of plot happening. There's not a whole lot going on with the characters outside of Judy and Daniela. Besides those two characters, there's not a whole lot going on. So if you're looking for a movie that is very in-depth with story, this might not be it for you. So there's a couple of things. It's a balancing act. You know what I mean? It has a lot of this, but then it also has a lot of this. So it's 50-50. You know what I mean? But I enjoyed it. So take that for what you will. Let's move on now. We're going to talk about some Marvel stuff. Actually, I'm going to switch hats here. Hold on. All right. See, I have to wear the Avengers hat for every time I talk about Marvel from now on. So here's a question that I've had. Has the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, peaked with Endgame? Again, like I said at the start of the show, this is something that I basically presented to a friend of mine back when Infinity War released. I basically predicted that, okay, Endgame is most likely going to be the highest grossing Marvel movie of all time. Because after Infinity War, we're left in this sort of area where we're like, well, what happens next? What's going to be the conclusion of this story? And obviously, Endgame was going to be that. But I kind of predicted that, okay, Endgame's going to make a crap load of money. But is it going to peak with that? See, here's the thing. Outside of the Avengers films, a lot of these Marvel movies don't make as much money. The first Avengers movie made $1.5 billion. Age of Ultron, the second Avengers movie, made $1.4 billion. Infinity War made a clean $2 billion. These are all approximate numbers, by the way. And then Endgame, as we know, $2.7 billion. Now, the jury's still out on if Avengers Endgame actually got the highest grossing movie of all time record. Again, I am recording this on Friday. The numbers for the re-release have yet to come out, but I will give you guys an editor's note as far as if it actually broke the record or not. But we're looking at 1.4, 1.5, 2, $2.7 billion. These are crazy great numbers. You know, whenever a movie makes this amount of money, it is 100% successful. Here's what I've noticed. Here's the pattern. The movies that are not an Avengers movie, one of these like big crossover films, they don't make nearly as much money. For example, after Infinity War, again, a movie where there are a lot of questions. People are eager to be filling in the gaps of, okay, we need answers before the next Avengers movie comes out. The first movie to come out, Ant-Man and the Wasp, made $622 million. Now, granted, Ant-Man, Ant-Man doesn't have quite the following as, say, something like Black Panther or like Spider-Man. But ultimately, this was the first movie that was after Infinity War. It should have had some degree of hype. But $622 million. Captain Marvel in March, earlier this year. That movie came out, and it actually made $1.1 billion. Now, Captain Marvel, again, post-Infinity War, this was one of the big questions that we had. Captain Marvel gets teased in the post-credit scene for Infinity War, and then we get her standalone film. So then we start to get answers, and we start to get pieces. 1.1 billion. That's all. It's a huge number. It's wildly successful. 100% they're going to make a sequel from it. But that's the amount of money it made. My point is that I don't see anything after Endgame making Endgame numbers. Because consider what Endgame is. Endgame is, what is it, the 23rd, 24th movie in the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? It's the conclusion of an arc that has been built for the last 10, 11 years. This is the end of the Infinity War arc. The arc that began all the way back with Iron Man in 2008. This was the end. Endgame sees a lot of things just finish up, wrap up. I honestly look at Endgame and I see it as a jumping off point. Now, that does not mean, I'm not saying that as a way of me saying that I'm going to be done with all Marvel movies from this point forward. I'm just looking at it and I'm saying, you know what? But a lot of people might. Maybe some people have gotten that superhero fatigue that we've been talking about for years. After this movie, there are going to be a lot of people that are like, you know what? That's a perfect ending for me. So I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to watch the next Spider-Man, or I'm not going to watch the next Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm just done. Some people are just going to jump off the boat. They're just going to be like, all right, I'm out. That was the perfect ending for me, and that's where I'm going to walk away. So because of the fact that it was the culmination and the finish of an epic saga, I don't see any movie doing $2.7 billion anymore because there was so much build. Now, could Marvel turn around and easily be like, okay, we're going to spend the next 10 years building the next big thing? Maybe that would do more. It's possible. And if anybody can do it 100%, it could be Marvel. But at the same time, are people going to look at those movies in the future the same way they look at Endgame? I think Endgame was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It came, it built, it went. I don't think we're going to see numbers like that before. Even if you look at the numbers of other franchises, let's look at the X-Men franchise. Dark Phoenix, the last X-Men movie to come out. Granted, it kind of came out recently, but also didn't do that well. $234 million. Logan, which is arguably the best X-Men movie to come out. $619 million. Keep in mind, it was a rated R film, so that might have kept some viewers away. Also, some people might not have realized that Logan was actually an X-Men movie, that it was about Wolverine. Marketing, you know how that is. $619 million. That's what Logan made. Days of Future Past, $747 million. Days of Future Past, one of the better X-Men films, like in the X-Men franchise. Like Logan is arguably separate, but out of the X-Men movies, $747 million. Deadpool 2, $785 million, where the first was $783. So it was pretty much made the same amount of money, if not $2 million more. That's Deadpool. Not $1 billion. Captain Marvel did $1.1 billion. Deadpool 2, which is of the X-Men movies, because I checked every X-Men movie, including all the Wolverine movies. Deadpool makes the most money. Now, Days of Future Past made the most money out of the X-Men franchise, but not like crazy MCU Marvel numbers. Venom. Now we're going to still Marvel, maybe MCU, maybe not, but $855 million. Wildly successful. Crazy successful. No wonder we're going to get a Venom 2. But all of this stuff, this is all like it's not MCU Marvel. But even MCU Marvel doesn't make as much money outside of the Avengers movies. The Avengers movies break $1 billion all the time. But even Avengers 2 didn't make as much money as Avengers 1. Infinity War had a big lineup. It had all these people starting to meet up. It's this big crossover. Guardians of the Galaxy is meeting Thor and Iron Man. And then you also have the people in Wakanda interacting with War Machine and everybody else. Like, there's all these big crossover moments. That movie made a ton of money. It's crazy good. Endgame was the finish of the story that had been building. I just don't see it doing the same numbers. Now, what's going to be very telling is Spider-Man Far From Home, which, again, releases in a week. So we're going to see, first of all, the reviews already very positive. But the earnings are going to be very telling. And we're not really going to know because its opening weekend is probably going to do very well. But Spider-Man Far From Home, again, it's the last Phase 3 Marvel movie. It serves as an epilogue to Endgame. So you're going to have all these things that are hopefully building for the next phase of Marvel, for the Phase 4 of Marvel. And very soon we're gonna start to get some answers on Phase 4. Spider-Man Far From Home is going to be a very telling movie because people are eager after Endgame to see what happens next, and Spider-Man is going to be the next thing. So if Spider-Man comes out and it makes crazy big numbers, it's not going to beat Endgame. I guarantee you, I would bet hard money on the fact that Spider-Man will not make as much money as Avengers Endgame. It can't. It won't. But also, you have to consider the cast members that aren't going to be coming back. Spoiler for Endgame, but you're not going to get Chris Evans. You're not going to get Robert Downey Jr. Maybe Robert Downey Jr. could be sprinkled in here and there in some role that we're just not sure of yet. But these are characters that we're just not going to see as much of anymore. So without a Chris Evans and without a Robert Downey Jr., are these movies really going to make as much money? You will see a new cast step into those leadership roles for these films. But again, you're losing some of your founders. You're losing some of your original names. And now you're bringing in all these new characters with the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, which haven't seen a whole lot of success on their own. These are movies that people, I think, are probably tired of. The Fantastic Four movies have never really done well. The last one they did just straight bombed, critically and financially. So even though people are getting these characters into the MCU, and now we're going to see the MCU's take on these characters, is that really going to be enough to reinvigorate and start to see crazy big numbers? Are we even going to get another Avengers movie at all? Because then there's talk of that. If we're just never going to get another Avengers movie again, are we going to get these numbers? The Avengers name will make a crap load of money alone. Okay, here's Avengers 5, Avengers Secret Wars, or Avengers Secret Invasion, or Avengers Galactus. We're going to get all these Avengers subtitle movies. If we get them, then they will make money. But will they make as much money as Endgame? I don't think so. I honestly don't see Endgame being beaten. I think that... Do I think that now the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to see a steady decline? I don't. I think it's too soon to make that prediction. But I think that it has peaked. The question is, has the MCU peaked with Endgame? And my answer to that question, I believe it is. I believe it has. I just don't think that anything that they do in the future is going to beat Endgame. Endgame was one of a kind. Endgame was the first to do something like this, a cinematic universe that built toward it. That's why it made as much money as it did. And even though you could spend the next 10 years to build the next thing, I just don't see that being as successful because you have all these people that are saying, okay, I've hit my superhero fatigue. I've hit my limit. The cash is full. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to just take a break from these superhero movies for a little bit. You're going to start to see a slow in the train that is Marvel. That's my prediction. But again, like I said, you're going to have to look at Spider-Man Far From Home, and those numbers are going to be very, very telling. That's all I'm going to say about that. So let's get into the Endgame re-release. Again, like I said, might get into some Endgame spoilers, which I might have already done that with the last topic, to be honest. Let's talk about the Endgame re-release. First of all, there are 3 scenes. Again, a tribute, a deleted scene, and a little surprise. If you watched my episode from last week, I made a little bit of predictions as to what they could be. They're exactly what we thought they were going to be. It starts with a tribute to Stan Lee, which is very, very wholesome. It is very, very, it's great to see. My theater got a little bit into an applause after it was over. They did like the little nice tagline of "Stan, we love you 3000." That got me. I was just like, my heart. But it's a very nice, it cuts to a lot of him filming his cameos and him fondly remembering his cameos and remembering these movies and being so happy to be a part of it. It's just, it's a great little package that they put together. But yes, this tribute is to Stan Lee, obviously. Now, the deleted scene, it is an unfinished deleted scene. There were some rumors before we got to see this officially, and the rumors are 100% true, of it's the Hulk jumping into a burning building and saving people and then getting a phone call, which leads into the events of Endgame. In Endgame, the first time that we see the Hulk is right after the heroes have tried to recruit Tony Stark to figure out time travel. And when Tony Stark ultimately turns them down, they turn to Bruce Banner, a.k.a. Professor Hulk, because Bruce Banner was able to merge the Hulk with himself, and they've basically become a smart version of the Hulk. Officially, it's known as Professor Hulk. So in this scene, we see him jump into the building, and then with like a big satellite dish, he carries everybody down. And then he talks to the chief about the building that's on fire and the heat in which it is burning at, and it could compromise the building. But then he takes a step to the side, gets a phone call, to which he says, "Steve who?" Which obviously Steve Rogers. Now, I think that leads into the scene that we do get in Endgame, where they're in the diner having breakfast. But I can see why this scene was cut out. I would have liked to have seen it in the movie. It's only about a minute long. It really wouldn't have extended the runtime of the movie that much. But when you look at it, I could see why it got cut out. Now, it is an unfinished scene, so the effects aren't great. The Hulk, when he's there, not fully rendered, not even moving his mouth. He's just kind of there. It's a placeholder thing, But it makes sense why it was cut out, because it doesn't really add to the movie. You get to see the Hulk do Hulk things, which we don't get a ton of in Avengers Endgame. He's basically doing more professory things. If you're quick, you can catch some of the glimpses of him doing Hulk stuff during the battle of Endgame. During the final sequence, you can see him throw a couple of dudes around. There's obviously, right after Thanos shows up and bombs the building, he's holding the rubble up to save Rocket and Rhodey from dying. Ultimately buys time until they are ultimately saved. But this scene does show the Hulk being the Hulk, even though he's not really the Hulk that we all know and love. It's an okay scene. It's not a crazy, mind-blowing scene, but it is something that I was like, okay, that's kind of cool to see. Seeing the Hulk be the Hulk and doing Hulk things. That's kind of hulking cool, I guess. And then we get to Surprise, which is a scene pulled straight from Far From Home. We go to Mexico. We have Maria Hill and Nick Fury. They show up. It's this town that has been ravaged, that people talk about. There was a cyclone that had a face, and then what looks like Sandman shows up. It's just this big sand dirt monster just shows up, and it starts, throwing things around and roaring, and then Mysterio shows up, Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, and he doesn't know who Nick Fury and Maria Hill are, but then he says, "You don't want any part of this," and he starts attacking, and then it just cuts. So it's the scene that we've seen from the trailers, but there's not a whole lot that is much of a surprise. It's a tease, and obviously very clearly pulled from the movie. When I went and I saw Captain Marvel, the post-credit scene for that movie looked like it was pulled from Endgame. In fact, I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's the post-credit scene is a scene from Endgame. I was like, that's a little lame. I hate when movies do that, when they use their, or I hate when movies do that, as if all movies do this. When the MCU movies use a post-credit scene, but it's a scene from a movie that we're going to see anyway. I would rather them do something that's unique. But here's the kicker. What happened in the post-credit scene for Captain Marvel actually was legitimately a post-credit scene. That scene does not appear in Endgame. It's the scene where the pager that Nick Fury uses to call Captain Marvel, it goes out. The Avengers all gather around. They're trying to figure out who it was calling and why it went dead. And then suddenly Captain Marvel shows up and she asks, where is Fury? That scene is not in the movie, but it does show the first interaction between Captain Marvel and the other members of the Avengers prior to Endgame, because by the time Endgame kicks off, she's already been integrated into the Avengers pretty much. She's still kind of new. You could tell that she's still kind of on the outs, but the scene that we see in Captain Marvel, not actually in Endgame. Whereas this scene, very clearly, straight out of Far From Home, because it's the scene from the trailer. I mean, the scene that we're seeing is clearly from the trailer. So clearly it's from the movie. So, but I can kind of forgive it a little bit, because I was like, well, it wasn't really officially a post-credit scene in Avengers Endgame. It was something that was tacked on later to kind of regenerate interest for people to come and see the movie. Now, with that said, those are the three things. It's a Stan Lee tribute, which is awesome. I really enjoyed that. I did smile a lot during it. There are a lot of really funny moments, little funny interactions between the main actors and Stan Lee himself. The Hulk deleted scene, I was like, I kind of like it, but also, you know, I would have been fine having not seen it as well. Like, I'm not saying that, like, oh, you definitely need to see it. It's crazy. And also, the scene that is from Far From Home is ultimately from Far From Home. So when you go and see the next Spider-Man movie, you're going to see the scene anyway. So do I think that Avengers Endgame's re-released scenes was worth it? Ultimately, nah, not really. I went to go see it, and I don't feel like I wasted my time, because ultimately I was looking for an excuse to see the movie a third time anyway. I saw Infinity War 3 times, so seeing Endgame 3 times I feel like is only proper. Also, with them of trying to get to the record, which again, I'm going to post over here, the earnings of the time when I edited this video of if it actually broke the record or not. Although I'm realizing right now that today I'm going to be editing the show immediately after recording it, so the numbers aren't really going to be there. So you just check box office mojo, see if it actually broke the record. I'm not going to have the numbers before this show actually gets posted, and I guarantee you the numbers here are not going to be reflective of the numbers that are currently as you watch the show on Monday, because then it would have been the whole weekend, and then the Avengers re-release would have been over. But that being said, me adding in my extra $10, my extra $11, however much the ticket was, I'm rounding up, I think it was about $11. But actually, to be honest with you, when I went to the theater, so my viewing was at noon, and usually when I go to see movies, I realize that the movies aren't going to start immediately when the listed time is. So it says, oh, this movie is going to start at 12. It never actually starts at 12. You go there and you still got to sit through about 15 to 20 to 30 minutes of previews of trailers of other things before the movie actually starts. So I got there a little after noon, and there was actually way more people in the theater than I expected. And every single one of them were there for the post credits, because we all waited and we all watched all those credits roll. And then at the very end of the credits, they finally started releasing the tribute stuff and the deleted scene, and obviously the surprise from Far From Home. I hope it got the record. I mean, I really, really do. It's currently, last I looked, I think it's at 2.751 billion, and I think the record that it needs to hit is 2.787. So that's what we're looking for. Hopefully it got it, but if the people that I saw in the theater that I went to is any indicator, good chance that it might have. But then I started seeing also, I was looking up some other people reacting to the idea of the re-release, and people were saying that it's not releasing in all 3,000 theaters, so it's not available everywhere. People are hearing about this re-release that's coming out on Friday, and not all theaters are showing Avengers Endgame. It's already moved out, so there is a big question mark. And also, are people even aware that this re-release is happening? I saw a couple of ads on Facebook saying, oh, get your chance to go see Endgame right now before it leaves theaters forever, which ultimately I think we have. The digital is going to be coming out later this month. And I think August 13th is the number that I'm thinking of for the Blu-ray release, which is actually way sooner than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, I mean, is the re-release worth it on its own? Are the scenes that we get at the end worth it on their own? Not really, no. The Stan Lee tribute is really, really, really nice. I kind of wish that it was there for the original. The Hulk deleted scene, you could take or leave. And obviously the Spider-Man Far From Home scene you're going to see in the movie. Anyway, speaking of Spider-Man Far From Home, I'm going to keep this kind of brief because we don't have that much time left in the show. This is post-Endgame. And like I said, there's a lot of interest going into this movie, namely because it is post-Endgame. It's the first movie that's going to, it's going to more, in my opinion, more serve as an epilogue to Endgame, showing how the world reacted after everything that went down in Endgame. And again, we're in spoiler territory at this point. What happened at the end of Endgame is that Iron Man died. Iron Man used the Infinity Stones, snapped his fingers, and got rid of Thanos' army. They also used the Infinity Stones to bring everybody back who was snapped from Infinity War. So obviously Spider-Man is back. That's why the Spider-Man movie is there. Iron Man sacrificed himself at the very end. But there's this weird thing that people started pointing out after Endgame, which is there's a 5-year gap in between Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. So we're taking place in, it was 2018 for Infinity War. Now it is 2023 in Avengers Endgame. These are, the event that happened in Infinity War is that all these people got snapped, loved ones, friends, family, comrades, they're all gone, you know? Half of everybody got eliminated. And then all of a sudden, all those people came back. So let's explore a couple of things here and there. Number one, let's say you had a spouse. Your spouse was unfortunately snapped away. 5 years later, you grieved, but then you started to move on. You met this new person, fell in love again, remarried. Well, now your old spouse is back. So it's like, well, what? The weird complications of this, it's got to be distorting as hell. Really disorienting. To be in a world that you've missed the last 5 years. This world has grieved, and now all of a sudden everything is back. So you're going to start to see the people who survived dealing with the fact that all of a sudden their loved ones are back, but also the people who snapped away dealing with the people who also survived and the fact that they didn't, and they moved on, and there were 5 years of history that they have missed. I really hope that Spider-Man Far From Home really explores this. Now, from the trailers, it doesn't seem as if that there's a whole lot of those kinds of conversations happening. Because in the Spider-Man Homecoming movie, everybody is pretty much the same age. You know, you got Michelle, you have Ned, Flash. Everybody is pretty much the same age. But then you got to advance 5 years. They're all looking like they are pretty much the same age. So it becomes the question of, okay, well, who was really snapped away? Who was not snapped away? And what's the dynamic between these characters? Or are they just going to turn around and be like, yeah, everybody got snapped? Which doesn't seem that outrageous when you consider half of everybody just got eliminated. But when you're looking at this dynamic between these characters, it seems as if they're just picking up right where they left off. So it stands to reason that, yeah, they all got eliminated, then they all got brought back. But I do want to have this movie explore more of what happened after everybody got brought back. At the same time, we do have to deal with this changing of the guard. Tony Stark is gone. Iron Man is gone. So now the question, which gets posed in the last trailer that we got for Spider-Man Far From Home, which is, who is the next Iron Man? Is Spider-Man going to be the next Iron Man? So we're going to be exploring more of that. Happy Hogan is in this movie, and most likely probably going to see more of him in future Spider-Man movies. So this movie definitely going to serve more as an epilogue for Phase 3 the final movie in phase 3. It's going to serve as an aftermath of Avengers Endgame. How did the world respond? I don't think we're going to get so much into what's going to happen in the future. I do think that there's going to be some things that it's going to leave open. I think it is a transitional period. It's more serving as an epilogue for phase 3, but it might leave maybe 1 or 2 things open for the next thing. Now, there is a rumor floating around that there is a post-credit scene that is a huge twist that's going to blow your mind. That's the rumor. Keyword on the word rumor. A lot of people are speculating that Tom Hardy's Venom, Eddie Brock, is going to show up in the movie, which will bridge the Venom movie and the Spider-Man movie together. A lot of people are speculating that it's going to be a scene where a bus shows up in New York and Eddie Brock steps out and he goes, "Oh, it's good to be home," which teases the future. Or perhaps the post-credit scene's going to tease something for phase 4, for the future. So there's a lot of questions going into Spider-Man Far From Home. We don't have that much longer of a wait. It's less than a week away. So I am really excited for it. So that's the show, guys. I got no other topics. We've talked about, what did we talk about? We talked about Overwatch for a while, much longer than I expected to. Annabelle comes home. We talked about if the MCU has peaked with Avengers Endgame. We talked about the re-release for Avengers Endgame and a little bit of some Far From Home for the next Spider-Man movie, which is going to release next week. So next week, guarantee you, I'm going to be talking about Spider-Man Far From Home. Most likely, I'm going to go see Far From Home, then come right back here and record the show. So that's it. I'm going to wrap things up, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, as always, please leave a comment down below. Let's keep the conversation going about any of the topics that we spoke about here today. Also, once again, if you could please give the video a like, if you could subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you could get notifications on any new episode that we post every week. Thank you so much once again for watching, and I will see you guys next week.